Good evening. We're going to call the meeting to order for the City of Walker Planning Commission for Wednesday, October 18. The first item on the agenda, second item on the agenda is to review the meeting minutes from October 4. We've had an opportunity to take a look at the draft beforehand. Any comments or questions?
Motion to accept.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Tyler, supported by Joe, to approve the minutes for October 4, 2023. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. This is an opportunity here for general public comment. We've got a couple items on the agenda. There'll be time, the 4.2 and 4.3, there'll be both public hearings, so it'll be an opportunity then to offer any comments on those particular projects. But if you've got something you want to talk about that's more general in nature, this is an opportunity to come forward and give your name and address and share with us your thoughts. Seeing no takers, we'll move on to agenda item. The first one, the presenter is not here yet, so we're going to bypass 4.1 and go to 4.2. Well, he's here right now. So we'll go to 4.1. And Chris? Yep.
Apologies, everyone. I'm here tonight to talk about the ongoing and close to the finish line zoning ordinance update. If you refer to the memo that's presumably in the packets from our office, it starts out with a timeline for the next couple of months as we look to get this zoning ordinance over the finish line. The first date on that list is tonight, which is a discussion of the big ticket items in the zoning ordinance update, to get your feedback on them on a policy level. So we do that tonight before we get into some of the more formal meetings, and we can catch any issues that may not have consensus or otherwise need to be reworked. The next thing that will happen in the process is the final meeting of the zoning ordinance subcommittee, which will be November 1st. The idea at that meeting is that they will make an official recommendation to the Planning Commission. So they'll take in any feedback from tonight, as well as their own thoughts on the draft that they've been reviewing for the last few weeks. And then we will have a draft that goes in front of you. The next step after that will be a joint meeting between this body and the City Commission. Again, to hash out any issues, make sure we're signed off on the big ticket items, at least from a policy standpoint. And again, make sure that we are clearing up things before we get into the very formal last couple of steps. December 6th, your first meeting in December, will be a public hearing and your formal recommendation, if you are ready at that point, to recommend adoption to the City Commission. They will hold their first reading December 18th, and January 8th will take their final vote. Of course, assuming everything stays on track, right? If we end up with a situation where we don't have consensus on something, or we want to change things, we're not necessarily held to this schedule. It can be altered. So, but that's the schedule we're going with as of right now. Any questions on that? All right. Good. With that, I'm going to dive into some of the big picture items here. First thing in the memo is the organizational structure of the new ordinance, which is fairly different than what you've got in your current ordinance, but hopefully will make this new ordinance easier to use, easier to find things, etc. A couple of highlights I want to point out here. After your initial few sections, right, you required legal statements and your definitions and things like that, your establishment of your zoning districts. The next couple of articles are basically tables. You're gonna have a table of permitted, actually multiple tables of permitted uses. It's multiple tables because not all of the zoning districts fit on the same page. But basically you'll have all the zoning districts in just a few pages, and it'll say what uses are permitted, what are special uses, what are not permitted in each district. You'll be able to compare and contrast. A developer or property owner will be able to refer to their zoning district and refer to the chart and scroll down. This also will allow you guys to have one single list of land uses that applies to every district, so there's no confusion as to what falls into what. The uses will all be defined, they'll all be in the chart together, they'll also all be in the parking chart, so you'll be able to take that one term and take it all the way through the ordinance. And another related is Article 7, which is the schedule of district regulations. Again, that it will be one chart, it'll show all the zoning districts, and it'll show setbacks, building heights, and other dimensional regulations. Next chapter after that is going to be the overlays, which I'm going to get into in more detail in a little bit. Then we're going to pull in our approved precise plats. That's language that's largely not changing. Then we'll have a chapter on residential density allowances. There's going to be another chart in there, and it's going to say specifically how many units per acre maximum are permitted in each zoning district. And the hope there is that that will make your deliberations as you work with developers easier, because it'll be very clear what is allowed in terms of residential density. Following that's going to be your PUD chapter, and I'm going to get into a couple of things in that chapter later on. Then your site design elements, your landscaping and your lighting, etc., as well as your parking. The next chapter is another new one, though. That's going to be neighborhood design. That's going to talk about road networks. It's going to be talk about reserved open space, sidewalks, things of that nature, and put into not just the PUD chapter, but in your ordinance in general. So they apply to not every single thing that gets built, but to large swaths of developments that are going to require new roads and other things like that. Following that's your mobile home section, your general provisions, kind of things that don't fit anywhere else. Signs, which have already been discussed quite a bit. Nonconformities, your approval processes, and your ZBA chapter. So that is the 19 articles that we're proposing. So on to actual policy, actual things that are in the ordinance, not just the organizational and schedule stuff. First things first, and that is zoning districts. There's a proposal to consolidate these. Importantly, we're not proposing to change the category of any particular lot, right? If something's zoned commercial, it's going to stay commercial. If it's industrial, it's going to stay industrial. But what we are proposing is to consolidate the 4 commercial categories down to 2, and the 3 industrial categories down to 2. I think particularly in the commercial districts in the map, we have kind of a hodgepodge of C2, C3, C4, C1, and it sort of seems to have at some point been rezonings based on what a property owner wanted to do and whatever commercial category fit them. By consolidating these districts, I think in your packets, Paula, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a draft zoning map, and I have copies here if anyone wants them. There it is. You can see, I hope, that when the districts are consolidated, the map gets a little cleaner. There's areas of C2 and areas of C1 rather than the checkerboard pattern we've had along some of our commercial areas. Similarly, in the industrial areas, there's a little bit more coherent pattern with the I1 and I2 as opposed to the 3 districts you have now. So that's what we're going for there. Obviously, we're open to any concerns that are on the map itself. Like, hey, whoa, why is that parcel zoned this, etc. And we can dive into that now, or I can keep rolling if we're happy with it. Sounds like looking like keep rolling is the
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. We'll keep rolling. Next thing's the overlays. These are a brand new addition to the new ordinance. And the general purpose of the 3 overlays is to create nodes of mixed-use development within the city and improve walkability in these 3 areas where we think that is both practical and desirable. Obviously, there's large swaths of the city where that's not practical or desirable, but in this case, in these 3 places, the staff working group and the subcommittee feel that it is. And those 3 areas are Standale. It's called the Standale overlay, and it's designed to replace the SDD district. The feedback we got at the beginning of this process was the SDD district is too strict and too difficult to work with, so we're actually dialing it back a little bit into what we're calling the Standale overlay. This would apply on Lake Michigan Drive between Cummings and Kinney. It would not apply all the way west to Wilson, so it's not covering the entire Standale business district, and it's certainly not going back into the neighborhood. It's just Lake Michigan Drive between Cummings and Kinney. What this district is trying to do is build off the existing built environment that has that what we call a slip street it's the connected front parking lots that are not super, super deep and allow people to move between businesses, both on foot and in a car, without going out to Lake Michigan Drive. That creates with the speed of traffic on Lake Michigan Drive, having a sidewalk that pops back towards the building and a slow speed drive lane where you can park is good for business and good for the pedestrian environment. So what we're going to do is basically require that for all new construction to retain that pattern. We're also, though, allowing buildings to get taller, up to essentially 6 stories, and with architectural requirements and things of that nature to try to make sure that we are getting high quality development. So it's trying to take that section of Standale, make it denser, more intense, more walkable, but retain that within an area where it becomes manageable, and not attempt to tell things that are at the corner of Lake Michigan Drive and Wilson, where we have drive-throughs and et cetera, that they need to retrofit in a way that maybe isn't practical. So that's what we were going for there. Next one is Remembrance, which is going to be the triangle formed by Remembrance, Leonard, and approximately Maple Row. It's not actually a true triangle. You can kind of see there. It's got actually a little bit of a funky boundary, especially because the overlays are avoiding existing PUDs and avoiding residential areas. But what we're going for there is to take that area, which has kind of an odd mix of various site designs, and try to create a little more coherence to it, and turn that area into a neighborhood node that you could potentially walk to. There are definitely businesses there that are worth walking to. It's just a little difficult from some of the surrounding neighborhoods. So the overlay requires site design that is going to hopefully improve that. One of the things that I really like about that we included in this is, in addition to all the regulations on something that's new construction, that are trying to create more of that walkability and mixed use. We also have the upgrades to existing section, which says if you're going to alter an existing building, you are not required to come into compliance with all of this. But here's a list of things you do have to do. And it primarily revolves around trying to make it safe and efficient and desirable for someone to go from the sidewalk to the front door of a business that may be currently kind of behind a big moat of parking. Not saying they have to get rid of that parking, but that they have to upgrade their landscaping and add crosswalks and sidewalks and just create a situation where you might feel a little more comfortable walking to that front door. That being the priority, rather than saying, whoa, no, that building just isn't what we like, and you got to put in millions of dollars just to come into compliance. Just upgrade the little bit, and we'll be happy, right? That's what we're going for Remembrance. Alpine. This is Alpine south of the highway only. It's not about Green Ridge, south of the highway. And this is probably the most urban of the overlays, because it's actually trying to replicate what is going on in the Alpine corridor south of the city limits in Grand Rapids, where you're seeing a lot of redevelopment into mixed-use buildings and multi-story, multifamily and stuff like that. And this is another area where I feel like the infrastructure and neighborhood can handle that kind of thing, and a place where you can absorb that housing demand, again, in a place where that kind of thing is desirable as opposed to somewhere else where it may not be. So this is going to be your district that's going to require not 0 lot line at the sidewalk, but a small 10-foot setback. What that's going to give you is a wider sidewalk or a little bit of landscaping to enhance the pedestrian environment, not squeezing people up against the road, but also not allowing parking moats, right? There's also architectural standards in this kind of thing, but I wouldn't call it form-based code. It doesn't rise to that level. But the idea is to show some redevelopment in this area, allow some redevelopment in this area. We know the demand is there on this corridor, and so that's the possibility. Next section, this is regarding, I said there's a couple of PUD things we wanted to talk about. One is the alterations to the MPUD section, and another is the creation of an RPUD 3. So first is the MPUD section. What we're going for here is creating a more clear list of rules and regulations for exactly how to mix the uses in a mixed-use PUD. And so what it basically says is you can do all sorts of things in a mixed-use PUD, right? You can have single family, you could have sort of missing middle 2, 3, 4 unit buildings. You could have multifamily, you could have commercial, you could have office, you could have medical. All this stuff is allowed in a mixed use PUD. But how do those uses work together? Basically, we have a series of setbacks for different uses from major corridors. So if you are up against a major corridor, say you want to do an MPUD on Wilson, just hypothetically. And so along Wilson, you could put commercial, you could put office, you could put mixed commercial residential, you could put medical, that kind of thing. Immediately behind that, you could put multifamily, or you could put townhouse or something like that. And then behind that, you could put single family. And then, what if I want to do a gas station or a drive-through? Well, you can do that, but it has to be in the corner of the development up against other commercial, so that you have a clear transition from non-PUD commercial into the mixed-use PUD, rather than putting something like that right in the smack in the middle of your development, where you're going to potentially harm walkability, or you're going to have negative impacts on your own development's residential or something like that. So just trying to organize where those land uses go within a PUD. That's the main purpose of the changes to the MPUD district. There are also, though, a few things in there about how street and sidewalk patterns are supposed to work within an MPUD. Trying to give you guys more tools to work with as a planning commission when you work with developers. And that is trying to make sure we're connecting to all adjoining roads with at least one road, but maybe sidewalks and bike paths or something like that if we can't do more than one. Connecting to our the parcels around, so that new neighborhoods can connect in, connecting to existing neighborhoods. And again, these could be roads, they could also be sidewalks or bike paths if that's what isn't making more sense. But the point is to connect rather than put up walls between different things. And also that a mixed-use PUD should have one road network. Not, well, this is the road network for the multifamily and this is for the single family. No, this is one road network, one neighborhood, one development. Next PUD, and please stop me, by the way, if there's anything you have a problem with, questions about. But if not, I'm just going to keep rolling. Next PUD thing is called RPUD 3. As you know, you have RPUD 1 and RPUD 2. RPUD 1 is primarily single family. RPUD 2 is mixed density, allows higher density than RPUD 1. RPUD 3 would be the only opportunity in any of these districts, overlays and regular districts, et cetera, to go over 8 units per acre on a site. So if a developer wants over 8 units per acre, they have to go into RPUD 3. Now, RPUD 3 would only be allowed in 2 categories of places, either within 500 feet of a Laker Line station, or in the redevelopment mixed use future land use category in the zoning, or excuse me, in the master plan, which basically means Green Ridge and the Meyer-Blaine area of Standale. That's basically it. So RPUD 3 would not be a tool that could be used everywhere. There's that pretty high barrier to even asking to do that. And it was discussed at the subcommittee. Like, if we're going to go higher density, it needs to be in a place that can handle it. And we've identified the areas we think we can create more walkability, and now we've also identified the areas where the infrastructure can handle more density. This is trying to absorb that demand in these places rather than having it spread to other areas and starting to get your pressure on you to allow more density because of the housing market the way it is right now in places that might not be able to handle it. So we're trying to say it goes here, not here, rather than make it a fight every time.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Real quick, I just find it interesting that you chose Green Ridge and Standale Meyer as the places for this when those are like the busiest places already. It's just interesting. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make a comment.
No, it's an interesting point. To be honest, I don't see the Standale Meyer turning over in something like this like in the next 50 years, but it is in that category in the master plan. Green Ridge, on the other hand, especially the shopping center in the back of it and the movie theater parking lot, where you've already seen some of that movie theater parking lot taken over the hotel, it's getting to the point where it's dated, and it is. You may see a developer say, I see a different vision for this area. I agree with you that the traffic in those areas is rough. What the subcommittee and our office were thinking there is that we don't want to bring that to somewhere else. These infrastructure's already there. The freeway interchange is already there. The wide state-maintained roadway is already there. The bus line is already there, right? These things are already in place. Water and sewer's in place. And rather than create another Green Ridge somewhere else, or a 21st century version of a Green Ridge, which is like high density housing or something. We're just going to take the existing Green Ridge and see if we can leverage that infrastructure a little bit. That was the thought process anyway. So one key aspect of RPUD3 would be demanding a level of quality from a developer. That if they're going to go over that, what is otherwise a citywide density cap, if they're going to go over that, we're demanding quality. And by quality, we mean a place where residents have access to green space, they have access to amenities, they have access to sidewalks, they have access to some sort of outdoor space that they could call theirs, like a balcony or a rooftop patio, even if it's an apartment building or a condo building. They have a place where they can put, say, a bicycle, and other sort of site design and site features and amenities that create value that lasts. What we don't want to see, and what we're trying to avoid with this series of regulations, is developments that they fill up quick because they're new. And when they're not new anymore, that appeal it goes away. We want to make sure that appeal is still there 20, 30 years from now because it was built to last and built quality. So that's what we're going for with RPUD3. RPUD3 is also broken up into two pieces, which is small sites under 2 acres and large sites over 2 acres. Small sites thinking maybe would be kind of an infill situation, where someone takes an old, small multi-tenant commercial and says, I have an idea and I'm going to put one building here, right? So the thought is, what does a high-quality building look like in that, as opposed to the large site, which is what does a high-quality complex look like, right? So that's what we're going for there. It is a standalone idea, right? So it's something that we want to move through this process and talk about. Ultimately, if we don't want to do it, it doesn't break anything else in the ordinance. It's its own piece. It can be inserted or pulled out. And that's true of many of these things. They can be inserted or removed without taking a lot of other things out of the ordinance. I mentioned earlier the housing density chapter of the ordinance, of the new ordinance, and the 8 units per acre citywide cap. So the next thing in the memo you can see is a breakdown by zoning district of the allowable housing density and how that ties to minimum lot size and how it also ties to the number of units you can have on a lot, right? So you can see in here, I'm not going to go line by line, but you can see that you have your AA agricultural, then your A2, SA, S districts, which are your single family, your ARM1, which are your multiple family. Those are where you can max out to 8 units per acre. You have your RPUD1, which allows the same density as A2. You have your RPUD2, which allows you to max out at 8 per acre. And your RPUD3, which is the only option to go above 8 units per acre. It also notes that housing is not allowed in commercial or industrial districts. And then finally ends with the overlays, which go to a full 8 units per acre. Again, assuming you can meet all the requirements of the overlay district. We also have minimum dwelling unit size in a chart here. This is actually not as complicated as it looks because there's only 2 categories. There's single family with a 960 square foot minimum, and there's multiple family, which is 450 plus 150 per bedroom. And if you're studio unit, you have to be 600 units per acre, 600 square feet per unit. So that actually is not, the single family is not a change, and the multifamily is just trying to clarify, I think, something similar to what you already have in simpler terms. Next one is neighborhood design starting on page 7. And this is, I know something that you guys have wrestled with as developments have come in, is how do we create a quality neighborhood out of this development? There are a number of things in the neighborhood design chapter. One of them is answering the question of what happens if I don't have water and sewer, right? Because obviously there are parts of the city that don't. And this is actually something that's in your current ordinance, but we've converted it into a chart to try to make it easier to use. And that is basically, if you don't have water and sewer, you are either going to be treated as if you're zoned agricultural or treated as if you're zoned S, and not allowed to go any higher density or anything like that, because obviously you need room for well and septic and that kind of thing. We can't support that kind of housing density if we don't have water and sewer. So there's an automatic, and by the way, I just said housing density, but that's also true of commercial and industrial. If I'm zoned industrial, but I don't have water and sewer, this chart says that I'm treated as if I'm zoned agricultural. So I don't even get to use my industrial zoning until water and sewer get to me. So that's hopefully, again, something where instead of fighting, it's like that's the answer, period. Next thing is the actual neighborhood design aspects. So these apply to any development that's going to construct new roadways, right? So if you're building along an existing roadway, this doesn't apply to you. But if you are building new roadways to build single-family homes, to build an industrial park, to build a multifamily complex, this applies to you. We want those roads to be public, and I'm going to see if Scott glares at me there. We want those roads to be public, and that way we know they're going to be maintained long-term. We're not relying on a homeowners association or something like that. We want them to be city roads, so we know they're maintained long-term. We know they're built to a certain standard, right? Road networks have to connect to all of just adjoining public roads and all existing stub streets. So if you have a piece of land that's on a corner, you got to connect to both. Doesn't mean you have to design it to allow cut-through traffic in a way that people are going to want to cut through. You can make them take 5 turns to make that cut-through. That's definitely an option, but you got to make sure you're connected. That's a public safety issue, but it's also a traffic management issue. Don't want people having to drive a mile to go 100 feet, right? We must have road networks to connect. It also requires the creation of stub streets to undeveloped parcels so that the next neighborhood over can connect in. It has restrictions on cul-de-sacs. It doesn't prohibit them, but it has restrictions on them in terms of you can't have more than 25 housing units on a cul-de-sac, and you can't have a cul-de-sac longer than 800 feet. Those are actually already in your engineering standards. We've added them to the zoning ordinance. There are also some other criteria for when the planning commission can allow a cul-de-sac, right? It has to, there's a number of things listed, but it can't be just because the developer wants to build cul-de-sacs. It has to be, well, because there's a wetland there, we can't go through it, or because I've got a neighboring property here that just will not let me connect to them. Okay, I've got a big steep slope. Okay, these are reasons to have a cul-de-sac. It currently prohibits gated communities. Neighborhoods be open to everyone. It has a restriction on how long a residential block can be before you have to have an intersection. And then ultimately, at the end of the whole section, it says, well, the planning commission can waive these things, but it's your discretion, right? You are not under any, if a developer shows up, they want to do something that's in violation, you can hold them to this unless you see some reason not to. It also requires sidewalks along both sides of all new roadways, and has an open space requirement. Right now, you have an open space option, right? That a developer can set aside 20% of a development for open space, and that can be, and then that allows smaller lot sizes and that kind of thing. This would not be an option, it would be a requirement. If you're building 50 housing units or more, you must set aside 10% for open space. And then that open space has to be accessible to the residents of the development, and has to be usable. It has to have walking trails, or it has to have some active recreation. It's not just like, well, I left it over there. Now, there would be an exemption here if you're within 1,000 feet of a park, right? Because then there's a park available. The other aspect of this is when you tie it to a PUD, right? Our PUD 1 and our PUD 2, because they're PUDs, you could potentially waive some of these standards using the PUD if you get something in return, as you would for any PUD, right? But the ordinance as drafted right now says MPUD and RPUD and by right developments. So if someone comes in and just wants to use the A district, right? They all need to follow these rules. And that's, again, we're going for quality, right? So those are the key hot topics in the new zoning ordinance, or the draft zoning ordinance, and I can take any questions, comments, or concerns.
Chris, in terms of the road network requirements and the discretion to waive the requirements, are there going to be standards of review for the planning commission to follow in making those decisions?
Yes, they're not clearly out in the memo, and I apologize for that, but there are I got into them a little bit when I was talking about cul-de-sacs, but it's that kind of thing. It's a physical, legal, environmental impediment that exists on the ground that says, no, you can't, I'm not actually gonna be able to comply with this. Obviously, it's not as high as like the threshold for a variance, but it's lower than I don't feel like it, right? It's like, you have to have there has to be a real reason why this is going to be problematic, and in that case, the planning commission can waive things.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions at this juncture?
Well, I'm a little overwhelmed by all this. I don't know about the rest of you, but I thought I'm a reasonably intelligent person, but yeah, I've tried to study this stuff and keep up on stuff, but yeah, it's a little overwhelming to me.
There is a lot going on, and this does reflect about 18 months of behind-the-scenes work with the subcommittee. But that's also why I'm here today. 6 weeks in advance of your public hearing to take that feedback. And I can also take feedback on the presentation itself, because we're going to have the joint meeting in about a month, and where I want to make sure that we are all clear on what's in this ordinance.
Yeah, I'll just quickly comment. This has been, we have put a lot of time and effort into this process. It is very technical in nature in a lot of ways. It is very challenging to kind of understand some of the nuance as you're kind of working through it. We're not all experts on zoning and land use and things like that, but I think that what I would suggest is take some time, work through it. Feel free to use probably Paula and Chris's resources as you're doing that, and make sure that we're kind of understanding what we're looking at and understanding the implications of it for the future of the work that we do here at the Planning Commission. So I guess my recommendation to you is do that, take that time, and make sure that you identify as you go through it and through that process any potential red flags, things, because I think there is still some work to do in here, just even as we review it again, and I've been through it at like various stages multiple times, and I feel like as I hear it through again, it's like, okay, well, there are a couple things that maybe we need to revisit as we go back through it. And I think that's just all part of the process, right? We're trying to get to the best version of what we can do to make sure that we are given the tools that we need as a city to allow development to work forward in the best interest of our residents. So there's plenty of process left, and I guess my encouragement to all of you is to make sure that you're going through there and making sure you're identifying what are some potential pinch points for us.
And I look forward to hearing your thoughts, Steve, at the subcommittee meeting in a couple weeks.
That begs the question. You mentioned that we have to take some time and look it through. How soon will we, as planning commissioners, have the draft regulations in front of us?
You will have
Tomorrow?
them. I'm sorry?
Tomorrow.
Okay.
I wanted to wait to send out the whole draft. It's, 250 pages of dense text and tables, until you got the overview from Chris. And so I have that already. It will be coming to you, so you can find things that he mentioned, go to those sections, review them for more detail. In addition, about the joint meeting, Chris and I are working together on a presentation, so there'll be a lot more visual things to help walk you through example language, all of that for the joint meeting, which will be it'll be hosted by the Planning Commission, the City Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Standale DDA are all going to be invited to come to that meeting. So there'll be more people here. It will be less formal up here, more of a working session meeting that Chris and I will work on together to help everybody understand and work through as many questions as we can at that time before the formal public hearing and adoption procedures.
Yeah, and just to comment, 250 pages feels like a lot, but the vast majority of it is just reorganizing our existing ordinance to be more logically arranged. And I think what Chris has done is highlighted a lot of the big changes. I think there are some other small changes, but the core of what we'll probably have to focus on is a lot of what Chris has highlighted here and visiting those sections specifically.
Additionally, I believe, Paul, you're going to send both versions, right? The clean and the track changes. So there's one version that is nicely formatted, easier to read, has a bunch of graphics in it, but doesn't tell you what's different, just is. The other one is in track changes, so you see everything that's different is in red. Now, I'm gonna warn you that it will give you a headache. So you're gonna wanna find the specific sections and not try to read that one cover to cover. But we wanna get it to you so you can tell what has been changed. And you can see, as Steve mentions, the smaller changes where it's like one word crossed out or something like that. And then there's other sections that are entirely in red because they're brand new, or other sections that are entirely crossed out because they've been removed. But at very least, hopefully that's a useful tool in you guys understanding what's different, what's the same. The other aspect of both of these drafts is that everything's got a new section number, right? It starts with 1.01 and goes all the way through. But each section is also labeled with its current section number. So if you want to do a cross comparison to the current ordinance, it either says, it'll say 94 hyphen and then the old section, so you can find it. If it's brand new text, it will just say new. And that way you know there's no equivalent section to go look for.
In terms of process, have we gotten, as the city engineer's office, had a chance to take a look at it as we've gone through this?
Yes, we have quite a few comments from the city engineer, and I think we have a few that maybe we're still working on resolving. But for the most part, yeah, we have the comments and we've made the revisions.
Yeah, we probably put about 8 hours into a review with Public Works, kind of a joint review, to make sure that we learn from the things that have happened in the past. Obviously, we want to do that. So, pretty significant size package came in. I don't believe that we've been able to follow up with them to see how they reacted to that. So we want to make sure we get a chance to do that. Thank you.
Yep, and we'll follow up on that with engineering. The other thing related to that is that there are some non-zoning ordinances that pieces of them are proposed to be included in the zoning ordinance, specifically subdivisions. And then there's some stuff that's in the zoning ordinance now that's proposed to be removed so that the non-zoning ordinance stands on its own without potential conflict from the zoning ordinance. Specifically, that one is stormwater. So we're trying to, in some cases where you've got some things that are in and out of zoning, we're trying to either put them all in or all out.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Chris, thanks for the overview. We'll be looking forward to seeing the draft product in front of us so we can review it.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to your comments, and we'll continue to work on this through, hopefully we can stick to the schedule, but we got time to keep making changes as we need to.
And obviously, I would imagine this is a public record at that point, and so anybody that lives and works in the city would have the ability to go online and access this information as well.
Sure, Paula, is it on the website?
The full draft is not up online yet, but it will be going up shortly. There'll be like a sub-page for this that you can see both of the versions that Chris was explaining and the map as well. And then the dates of the meetings coming up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, folks. I'll see you, so some of you in a couple weeks, the rest of you in a month.
All right. Those out in the audience, appreciate your patience here. It's an important part of the process in terms of our zoning regulations. So we appreciate your patience this evening, and we'll move right into the public hearings. The first one is case number 23-023. It is a public hearing, and Paula Preby, the city planning director, will introduce the project.
Thank you, Chair. 23-023 is a site plan review for 2756 Hillside Drive for Universal Spiral Air. It's an industrial facility located on the east side of the city. So here's Alpine and the highway junction, and the facility we're looking at is here on the corner of Land Camp and Hillside. And I just pulled it up to give people some reference there. And then I will jump back to the site plan now that everyone's oriented a little bit. They're requesting site plan approval for a new truck dock and future 6,000 square foot building addition with expansion of parking lots and a few additional site improvements. The applicant met with the site plan review committee in the middle of September, was provided feedback. The resubmitted plans are in alignment with the Walker zoning ordinance requirements as to use, setbacks, lot coverage, parking and loading, and lighting requirements. The one thing I want to draw your attention to, well, just to orient a little, there's the existing building, as you can see. The proposed truck dock addition is here. And then the future expansion is on the other side. Then there is stormwater retention. You can see these circles here with the lines through them. Those are proposed trees. It's an existing site, so the landscaping, our ordinance doesn't particularly clearly address to what degree an existing site must be brought into compliance. Full compliance is a lot to ask of an existing building. They're making some efforts here regarding trees. It's an interesting case because immediately across the street, we've got some residential homes, a residential neighborhood, abutting an industrial area. And that has a lot of strict requirements for buffering when it comes to landscaping. I provided a table from the ordinance in your report from me. So with this addition, the applicant will be planting 20 maple trees along the west side of the property to screen the parking lot and building from the residential properties across Hillside Drive. But the number of trees proposed does not meet the standards in the zoning ordinance section for a industrial property abutting a residential property, which is the highest standard in the ordinance. That's this chart here, which calls for type C when there is residential adjacent to industrial, which requires a 20-foot wide buffer with 8 trees and 8 shrubs for every 100 linear feet of frontage, which is a lot. But usually warranted to make sure that the homes are properly screened from the business use. The site has frontage totaling 424 feet along Hillside Drive. According to the letter of the ordinance, this would require a buffer of somewhere between 15 and 20 feet in width and between 5 and 8 trees and 5 and 8 shrubs per 100 feet, which is a total of 21 to 34 trees and the same number of shrubs. There is not proposed landscaping on any other sides of the property. If I jump back here, you can see this is a regional trail that runs along the property, and that is outside of the property boundary. It's not on the property of the applicant. It does grow up with shrubs and some small trees every year, provides a fair amount of screening, but again, it's not on site and it's not always well screened. So you can see in this image here, there are trees. So if you're driving by from the road, there is some screening from the property. If you're on the trail, there's not. The sidewalk or the drive access here, proposed parking with the addition, is right up against the property lines. There's not a lot of room for additional landscaping. Just kind of giving you information here. So you can see in the site plan, trees are proposed between the path, the road, and the residential properties on one side of the property. And I encourage the Planning Commission to discuss to what degree the landscaping needs to be brought into compliance with the ordinance. Is what's proposed sufficient? Is there more that you would like to require? It's really at your discretion at this time. That's really the only additional note that I had after the resubmittal that addressed most of the concerns that we had from the planning and zoning perspective. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Any questions, commissioners? Just a clarification, right now, the occupant of the building is what, West Michigan Granite?
No, it's Universal Spiral Air. The applicant is here.
West Michigan Granite is a tenant in the building now, but they're leaving by December 1.
Gotcha, okay, all right. Thank you. All right, thank you, Paula. Scott Connors, City Engineer.
So this is really a pretty small addition, and of course the report we have has got a pretty small list of items, so this should make it quick. First off, the report that we submitted is that the dumpster size along the east side of the building, which is really the back of the building, looks a little bit small on the plans. A little bit concerned about whether pallets, boxes, discarded material and stuff like that might end up next to that because there's not enough room. If you look at that and the pictures that Paula just showed, that would be clearly visible from Land Camp and the office building across the street as well. So that might be something for you folks to consider as you review the plan and begin to ask questions. Then relative to the dumpster, I think the truck access for that dumpster really requires a cross-access easement on the property to the east. And looking at the aerial that we showed in our report, it almost appears that the neighbor to the east really needs a cross-access across this site in order to get to their site in the backyard. So there really needs to be some kind of a cooperative agreement in place. We did ask for that at site plan review and have not seen that yet, so we'd want to make sure that that was resolved. The addition for the building really is for 2 truck docks that'll be facing Hillside Drive to the west. Part of the concern that we brought up at site plan review is that the trucks and the truck turning templates for that need to use Hillside Drive as their turnaround. So they want to pull down Hillside to the north and then back in to the trail. And that's pretty well forbidden for industrial sites. But, you know, again, Hillside is a really low volume street. It's probably not the end of the world. I certainly don't want to get in the habit of maybe supporting that, because then, you know, everyone's going to come in and say, well, you supported it for this one. So really the decision's up to the Planning Commission. But one caveat to that is that there's a regional trail that crosses the driveway, and that is a concern for you to think about. I think one thing that can help is making sure that the material across the driveway for the trail is a different color, different material, just like we put concrete sidewalks across the paved sidewalks in our standard details, so that people know that the sidewalk has right of way over the driveway. I think that would be wise here. Looking at the aerial, the existing driveway is just all straight concrete, so it doesn't give that illusion of requiring to give right of way to the pedestrians. The plan seems to show that it would be paved again through the driveway, but we kind of want to make sure of that. And the trail is part of the Kent County Park System. We granted approval for that via a license agreement many years ago. So while it's in the public right-of-way, there's another agency involved. And so we did send a copy of the report to Kent County Parks. And I believe it would be wise for any approvals that were considered here to have that condition of approval to allow the Parks Department to provide comment, and if they had any concerns, to make sure those are addressed. And then the last issue we had, more technical in nature. There's quite a few elevations on the plan when you start looking at the storm sewer design and the elevations that appear to be off by a couple hundred feet. So we'd want to make sure that that's all resolved, and that has been given a preliminary review in our department for stormwater, and that was the first comment that came up there as well. So that would have to be amended. That's it for us.
Commissioners, questions? Scott, I share your concern with regard to the trail as is in the path of the movement of vehicles in and out of the site, especially with it being a backing movement. And the only way I could think that that could be remedied would be to add a drive actually coming in off from Land Camp, so they're coming into the site, looking forward. They're seeing what's going on on the trail. There's trail users, and likewise, as they're exiting the site, they're facing out. With the layout that's there, I'm not sure that it's feasible to have a drive come in off from Land Camp, but that would be, to me, would be something to look at. Again, looking at that conflict that you could have between people using the trail and those likely large trucks backing off from the public street into the property. And if they had a one coming in off from Land Camp and exit off in Hillside, those maneuvers would take place on the property instead of on the public right-of-way. So for what it's worth, any other comments concerning this City engineer's comments, report? Okay. At this point, the applicant, if you want to come forward and make a presentation, please give us your name and address and who you're with.
Certainly. My name is Dan Hula with Hula Engineering. I'm at 17 West Oak Street, Sand Lake, Michigan, 49343-0194. I'm the one to put the site plan together, okay?
I'm David Krupp, I'm the owner, Universal's father.
Right. So Dave's running out of room and bought this. We need the truck docks, okay? But in order to justify the cost of putting in the truck docks, we also need the additional square feet to go along with that, so that the manufacturing process, okay, and the truck docks all go together economically, okay? And as far as the landscaping is concerned, we're paved right up to the property line all the way around. So the trees that we're showing on there are actually gonna be in the right of way. And the number of trees, I'm sorry, I rounded down instead of up, should be 21 instead of 20. We can just put another one out there if we need to. And again, being in the right of way. We've got them just off of the pavement because there's a aerial, line, it's not power, it's, I think it's cable. But then there's power halfway down. That would be 13 feet away from the trees. The tree canopy on a full-grown, sunset maple that we're proposing, kind of the city standard. The crown is between 30 and 40 feet. So it kind of fits, okay? So that's why we placed them where we did. We don't have shrubs. We can put shrubs in, that's not a big deal, but the recommended spacing between between those maple trees is 25 feet apart. If we do 5 every 100 feet, that would be 20 feet apart, which is okay. What we've got on our plan is 18 feet apart, okay? Because we don't have the full 400 feet. We've got a drive entrance that we gotta deal with. So we crammed everything else, and some of the other ones I put in the right of way, even on the other side of the trail, okay, in order to make that fit. My opinion is if we put shrubs underneath that, those trees are gonna just drown them out. Our house has maple trees all over the place, about the same spacing. We can't grow anything on our yard except hostas. That's just about the only thing. Look at that lily of the valley. But we're not against putting in, if there's some type of bush that you would like, we can certainly do that. But that's, what we have on the landscaping. As to the backing movement off of Hillside, Hillside was a main drag through there before they put the expressway in. And West River Drive didn't go through, if you will. They basically took Hillside Drive and made that the interchange, and then continued West River all the way through and then around what used to be Atlantic Mills, that new street in there. So what we have left here at Hillside Drive, right directly across the street, there's 2 commercial zone properties, okay? And then there's one resident that probably should have sold a house when they put the expressway in, but it's there. So there's only one residence across the street. He's well back up the hill and behind some trees. So it's really, really hard to see from the street view. If we had a street view, you could kind of see it. But you can see it's quite removed from the site. So having those additional barriers there. The other thing that we want shrubs for is to keep parking lot headlights out of the street, okay? So that's another reason we put the shrubs. So I didn't include the shrubs because there's not a real good practical reason for them, but we can always put them in there if you'd like to have that, it's, simply a matter of planing stuff. As to the backing motion, how many semis do you have come in there once every?
I would have, it's mainly gonna be used with box trucks, 26-foot box trucks. But, I'm sure you could get to a point where there's a semi, a couple a week,
So it's not like we're getting 3 or 4 semis a day,
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have them,
That's-
but it won't be excessive.
right?
It's gonna be mainly box trucks.
Yes.
But I think what, you guys have all talked about already is that, it's a dead-end street, it's pretty low traffic in that whole area in general at the moment. The trail doesn't get used a lot for what it's worth, but, clearly that's a concern. I'm not sure how that affects the decision. We do have a cross easement written up by an attorney with our neighbor already. I just didn't get it submitted in time for this meeting. I got it right here in the folder. And so we will have a cross easement that, have an easement between those two buildings that we can see there.
Right. So that was, the cross easement was in the works. We didn't have a chance to get it signed before Dave left town and now, but it's been drafted, it's been reviewed, it just needs to be signed and notarized. It's, that's a given. Because we both, in the past, that's what we've used. We just never had a formal agreement, that's all. So we can make that formal, easy peasy. As far as the dumpster's concerned,
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff back there now. It comes and goes and, that type of thing. So whether we put we could put a fence up, okay, on just one side that, would
shield stuff, yeah.
shield,
Yep.
yeah, from land camp. That might, where it wouldn't be enclosed, okay? But then we could put, whatever we need. If you got the roll-off type of dumpsters they use for scrap, metal scrap and stuff like that. So sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 3, depending on, what's going on inside the building at the time. So it's real hard to say this is, and to enclose something like that because it comes off a roll-off truck. But we can put a fence in there as a buffer, if you will, from the edge of the building out. And then everything else would be behind that, so you couldn't see it from land camp.
I could, if that was a concern, I would consider maybe doing a fence along the trail. So if you're on the trail, you can't see into the property.
That's
And
another idea,
Then if you're on land camp, you would be blocked from seeing all the way over.
right? That fence would, however, have to be in the right of way because we're paved right up to the right of way.
True.
So, that's why I didn't put anything over there because that's right away. I did take on Hillsdale, I took the, putting the trees in the right of way because, it's street trees, we put them in the right of way. But on the other side, so we can do that too, put the fence in between. I think there's like 5 feet between the property line and the trail. It's not much, but we would be open to that too. The only other thing is the drainage, and we're proposing a sand filter to take care of the water quality. We can bring the water quality up to, the standard's 80%, we can get up to 90% of particulate removal with that. Given the soils that we have out there, it's pretty much filled. In the area between the building and, I wanna say behind the building, but between the building and the expressway, that has been used for kind of a dump for years. It shows, it's called a drainage ditch that goes through there. Somebody went back there with a number 2 round point and just simply dug a ditch, okay, across that dump area, into the highway ditch, okay, so that water wouldn't back up on the parking lot. So we plan on putting in a catch basin, running that into a vegetated swale, which is a water quality device. From the swale, it goes into a sand filter to clean it up. In the process of doing that, we slow the water way down because right now it runs off at like 7.5 cubic feet per second. We've taken that down to like 0.7 going through that sand filter. But there's no place to get rid of the water. So when it comes to the channel protection volume that normally you want to infiltrate or something like that, basically make it go away. There's no way for us to make it go away. So we cannot meet the flood control storage that would be required by the ordinance, and we can't meet the channel protection or channel protection quantity, okay, that's required, because there's just no place to put the water. But with the sand filter, we slow it way down, and so what's coming out is a fraction of what it is. Given the drainage area that we have, we're going from like 26,400 cubic feet of runoff now on a 100-year storm to 26,900. So basically what we're doing is we're increasing the whole thing by 400 cubic feet, okay, by adding that 6,000 feet and, doing that work. The truck docks are already in a paved area, so that's not contributing any more or any less. So basically, it's just from that 6,000 square foot addition, we would get an extra 400 cubic feet of runoff in a 100-year storm, which, given the whole thing, is pretty much negligible.
If I may, Scott, from your standpoint, I didn't see anything in your report that would say that there was any deficiencies that you had identified.
No, but since that time, we did have Rachel take a look at that, and I haven't told you about this, but Rachel's actually gonna be leaving the city at the end of the week, so we wanted to get a quick look from her, so that we had some idea. And she did mention a 400 cubic feet of unmet channel protection, and we can't provide variances for that, unfortunately. That's the way the state wrote their laws.
So if this plan doesn't meet that, what is their option at this juncture?
They'd have to find a way to meet it or not do the addition.
For our part,
Okay.
we could just condition that and say, good luck to you solving that problem though, correct?
Absolutely, and there's always a way. And this was something that we begged the state for some latitude to be a little flexible, and there was zero interest in that. So that's one of those things we just can't provide any kind of variance for.
Okay.
So, but other than the stormwater variance, are the other issues something we could work with?
Well, that's what we'll be deliberating on. This is a public hearing, so we wanted to have your presentation, an opportunity to take public comment,
Gotcha.
and then we'd be able to deliberate thereafter.
Okay.
I do have one question. In terms of there's a commercial storage container on the property right now. Is that
Temporary.
temporary?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
All right.
As soon as West Michigan Granite leaves the building, we're gonna occupy that part of the space, and we'll get that continually moved.
Okay. And there was mention made of scrap metal. Is that contained within the building and then removed from the site, or is that stored outside and then?
Typically, if it's allowed, they're stored outside.
Okay.
Yep. Just because inside space is so precious, you want to use it, you can for manufacturing.
And obviously you're operating there right now.
We're operating in the back half of it right now, yep.
Yeah. And so by storing it outside, it's consistent with how it's been handled up until now.
Well, like on our other property across the street, we have scrap containers that we store outside, and it's just a a better use of space for such a thing, because they're usually tall and long, and you're dumping stuff into them, which you want to do that outside, is a safer way to do it. You're away, you're not having any people around you do it. So like in that facility, we don't show the scrap dumpers, but we would want to put an outside scrap dumpster.
Okay, all right, thank you. We'll
Yep, thank you. Any more questions?
Stay nearby, so as questions come up, we'll be able to call upon you.
Should we stay up here, or you want me to go sit down?
Generally, if you want to sit down, and then, this will give an opportunity for the public to come forward.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
For a motion?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to open a public hearing.
Support.
Okay, motion by Steve, supported by Pat, to open the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Anyone want to come forward and have any questions or comments concerning this project? Okay. Okay, seeing none.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Support. Okay, motion by Pat, supported by Tyler to close the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Commissioners, comments, questions, motion?
I'll make a couple comments. This is an existing building, so I tend to be a little more lenient on how we proceed. They're putting in the trees, that's fine with me. The dumpster in the back of the building is fine with me. If you drive that trail all the way down by the river, you go behind a lot of businesses along the river there, and you see everything behind the businesses. They're not all sealed off with fences and stuff. You don't need to, I don't think they need to do that. That's just, this is an existing building. They're gonna do some improvements. They're gonna do some improvements out front. The backing across the path, I think, is unavoidable. Either way, you're gonna cross the path, either coming in, going out, or I think it'd be a lot more difficult to probably get it out onto the road beside them. I'd like to see that, but I can accept this isn't a heavy traffic area by any means. And the path is not, I live off of 3 Mile there, and so I don't see a lot of traffic on that path. It's a nice thing to get down there with, so I don't, the stormwater thing is their issue. You have to fix that, whatever they do there, so that's just my opinion.
Okay. Joe?
I thought some of Scott's comments were very good, and particularly about marking yellow where the trail is. I think that's something we could easily do and isn't going to upset anybody. I thought Scott, a couple other his comments are good too.
I agree with the comments that have been offered.
Same here.
Okay. Yeah, my only misgiving is having the vehicles backing out across that rather than coming forward. So that's just my perspective on it. I think it's a good project. Otherwise, you're expanding the use of the building. They have a tenant in there, so they're gonna fully utilize it, and it'll work together with the other property that they have a little bit to the south again. So, does anyone offer? Yes?
If I get a chance, I'll make one more comment.
If you may, yes, you can. Yeah.
Does it help at all to brag about what we're doing for people's lives and jobs?
Sure.
All right, so I started with 3 people 20 years ago, and we've added like 20 people in the last year. And this building is key to us continuing to grow and expand. So just throw that out there.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion on case number 23-023, 2756 Hillside Drive Northwest Site Plan Review. Based on the application material provided, I make a motion to approve the site plan for a truck dock and the future 6,000 square foot industrial building expansion, associated parking lot and site improvements at 2756 Hillside Drive Northwest, subject to the following conditions and based on the findings of fact below. Conditions: the applicant shall address all items outlined in the city engineer's report dated October 11th, 2023, including the additional stormwater discharge. The applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineered plans incorporating the recommended conditions to the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of building or stormwater permits. Finding of fact per section 94-283, the dimensional arrangement of buildings and structure conforms to the required yards, setback, height, and other regulations of the ML zoning district. The bulk, location, and height of proposed buildings will minimize any adverse effect to other development in the surrounding area and will not place demands on public services or facilities in excessive capacity. Proper site drainage will be provided so the removal of surface water will not adversely affect neighboring properties or the public storm drainage system. The provisions for parking and for vehicle and pedestrian circulations on the site onto adjacent public streets will not create hazards to safety and will not place demands on public services or facilities more than capacity. Off-street parking and loading areas have been provided in a manner that will minimize noise, glare, odor, and other effects on uses on the site or on adjacent properties, noting that the Planning Commission did offer some concern of the backing in across the trail. Drives, streets, and other elements have been designed to promote safe and efficient traffic operations within the site and shall provide safe and efficient vehicle access to and from the site. Excess lighting will not create undue hazards to motorists traveling on adjacent public streets, nor damage the value or diminish the usability of adjacent properties. Lighting will be adequate for safety of occupants or others users of the site. Landscape buffers will be preserved to provide and ensure that prep hollows uses will be adequately buffered from one another and from surrounding public and private property. All buildings will be arranged to permit sufficient access to emergency vehicles.
Support.
Okay, motion by Tyler, supported by Steve to conditionally approve the project as detailed in the motion. And I guess the key part of it is there's one piece of it that's beyond the city approval, and that relates to the state requirements. So with that, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is case number 23-25, and again, Paula Preby, Planning Director, will introduce the project.
Thank you, Chair. I will orient us again as we get started here. So we are looking at a series of properties for this case. This is 23-025 rezoning in preliminary area site plan review for the Vista 45 CPUD, Commercial Planned Unit Development. So we're in Standale, we're on the far west side of Walker along M45, behind the Meyer Standale Planned Unit Development. So behind Meyer and Blaine's, we're looking at this area over here. And I will pull up the site plan for you. The project overall is going to be familiar to the Planning Commission. You've seen the larger Vista 45 project several times. They are back at this time just for the commercial component of the project, separating this from any future other components, utilizing some of the space. So what you see marked out here in red outline colored in red, proposed CPUD area, 22 acres. That's the part of the project that we're talking about today. It's proposed to be a commercial village development with 11 commercial lots on a new public road extension, new private road. There's 11 lots ranging in size from 0.79 acres to 2.12 acres. An extension of LaSalle Avenue to the south and 2 new private streets that come in off the existing drive here, which goes to the Goodwill, and an extension of this private drive between Meyer and the outlots along the south side of Lake Michigan, connecting to Ferndale. Stormwater detention area is located off-site and sidewalks, pedestrian crossings, and a pocket park. So there are two components that we're looking at today and two motions related, one for each of the components. I'll address them separately. The first is the rezoning request. The site is currently zoned, this is the zoning map here, an excerpt of the zoning map. You can see 3 different colors within the properties being discussed. Agricultural, that's what you see shaded in green. C1 is the lighter red along kind of at the corner with Ferndale, and C4 outdoor commercial is the dark red you see behind Meyer and Blaine's. Surrounding parcels are zoned agricultural and C1 to the west, CPUD to the east, C1 to the north, and both AA and C2 to the south. So you can see it's kind of surrounded by similar zoning. One of the considerations when deciding a rezoning request, consistency with the master plan. The master plan, similar to the zoning map, shows split designations for the properties in question. This is an excerpt from the community character map found in the master plan. The northern portions along Lake Michigan Drive are marked neighborhood corridor, and the southern portions are marked residential growth 4 to 8 units per acre. And then another thing to consider is the proposed rezoning to CPUD, which allows the flexibility to create that cohesive village format that they're trying to do, that hopefully will act as a buffer between the kind of backside of those large big back stores and future development to the east, which is, I believe, proposed to be residential. So that is some information about the rezoning request. It's my view, especially when you look at this map here, you can see how the breakdown in the master plan with commercial along Lake Michigan Drive and commercial behind the buildings aligns with the location of commercial on the property you see in this map here. So I believe the rezoning request to be in line with the community character map of the master plan. Another thing to consider when you're thinking about this is the use table proposed for the CPUD here. This is part of the PASP that we're discussing, but it is also related to zoning and use. So I wanted to bring it up at this time. So here is, I zoomed in here, the CPUD development table is called. It's all of the lots identified, the size of the lot, the use proposed to be allowed on those lots, and an estimated building footprint based on the size of the lot once you apply the setbacks, etc. So you'll note that all of the uses are proposed to allow C2 use. All of the lots are proposed to allow C2 uses. Several of them are also proposed to allow things noted below. Select C4 uses such as drive-in restaurants, gas stations, minor auto repair, interior self-storage. They're asking to be allowed. C4 retail uses such as car washes, car lots, camper and RV lots, mobile home lots, farm machinery lots, and construction equipment will not be allowed within the development. So this is their proposal as we move forward to talk about the PASP. This is part of that they're asking for those additional uses within the project. Any questions about the rezoning request before I move on to talk about the PASP in more detail?
Paula, with regard to the consistency with the master plan, as I look at along the east line of the site, it seems to be consistent as you get, at least until you get down beyond the Meyer property. But at that point, it would appear that that was identified for residential growth.
Yes, it's marked out here. These blocks are not exactly consistent. When this was drawn, I don't believe Blaine's was here yet. It's obviously at the discretion of the Planning Commission recommendation, the City Commission approval, but from a planning perspective, it feels appropriate to have a buffer between the backside of the large Blaine's Farm and Fleet store and future residential development that helps the massing scale down and also acts as a visual and kind of noise light buffer between the different uses. I don't feel that it's inconsistent to pull this down a little farther. Because these lines as drawn, this is split designated on the community character map. They don't exactly align. That also doesn't align exactly with the location of Meyer and the drive, which actually comes a little bit further down. I don't believe the intent of the ordinance is that those lines must be followed exactly, but that is up to interpretation.
Yep, okay. And so so we've got the rezoning request, we've got the preliminary area site plan, and that includes the pattern book?
Yes, let me move forward with the PASP, and I will talk about the pattern book as well. So in addition to the site plan you see here, it's broken out into more detail and specifics as you go through the plan set. But I'll just leave for the purposes of people seeing as we flip back and forth. Here is the larger site plan. The applicant met with the site plan review committee on 9/28. I apologize, there's a typo in my report that says October 28, which hasn't happened yet, and was provided feedback. Most of the staff concerns were addressed at that time related to public safety, planning and zoning, and a few miscellaneous topics that came up. A few remain. I will cover them now. The first, let me address the pattern book first. So in addition to the site plan set, the applicant provided a pattern book which would be part of the approval if this project moves forward, that kind of locks in some information, standards, design, et cetera, for the development. You can see it goes through the street network. The extension of LaSalle to the south street is noted as to be dedicated to the city of Walker. That would be public street, built to public street standards. I believe Scott will get into that in more detail. Additional private roads coming in here, connecting to other existing roads. And then you can see a small amount of land to be granted to MDOT as additional right-of-way to allow for turning movements on Lake Michigan Drive. Site management, so where are the access points into the development and where are cross-access points within, from the roads into the sites, cross-access within the sites themselves, pedestrian crossings across the roads, sidewalk connectivity, giving more information about the project, how you get to the cohesive village feel they're going for. The streetscape will have consistent amenities. This graphic here, that is the light fixture that the DDA has chosen for the Standale DDA for their new streetscape lighting project. That would carry through on the public street component of this project to tie that in to the DDA. And then some architectural standards. The signage is part of this with the PASP approval as well. You can see signage here, what they're proposing, different types of signs that would go in different places throughout the development. One of my notes, getting back to my report here, is about signage. You can see this is the final page of the PASP. It shows those same signs. And then it's hard to see on the screen here, but notations where signs would be located around the property. There's currently no way to tell which sign types accompany which sign locations, so we're asking that the numbers V1, C1, C2, D1 are appended to the sign markers, so which signs go where is noted as part of the plan and approval. Further, there's a small pocket park that you can find in the pattern book here. This is what we're looking at. So as you're coming eastbound on Lake Michigan Drive, you would see this, you can see the 3D view of the pocket park in the corner here. They're proposing a gateway sign that would say Vista 45 and Welcome to Standale. This rendering and the accompanying text that's provided here is really all that's provided at this time. So we would like to see a sign graphic with dimensions on the sign or on the site plan along with all the other signs, because this sign is not something that would be granted through our regular sign permitting process. So if it's not included here, it won't be allowed. So that is noted as a condition of approval from the planning side. Another thing is on here, they show the proposed street trees. The number of trees is sufficient. There's an increased landscape buffer provided around this lot 5, which will not have the street acting as a buffer between that lot and any future development. So we appreciate the additional screening there. One note is that a lot of the trees identified to are American elm, and the city's street tree policy includes American elm as a list of undesirable street trees. So as a condition of approval, those trees should be swapped out with one of the approved trees from the list. Another concern that staff has is that you can see here, the proposed stormwater management areas are located off-site. They're not in the area of this that we're considering for the rezoning for where the commercial development is. It's one of the, I guess, the risks of this piecemeal approach of separating the commercial from the residential. The applicant could possibly have future problems by locking in the location and size and things of the stormwater areas to this approval when they come back for any future redevelopment in the remainder area of the property. One final component I want to discuss and give the Planning Commission for consideration and conversation as they get to the deliberation stage is PASP consistency with the master plan. So this is, we're looking at a different part of the master plan now from earlier, which was the community character map. This is the West Standdale redevelopment plan. It's included on pages 67 and 68 of Book 2B, the South Walker Neighborhood Cluster book. It includes information about this particular area, redeveloping this area. It includes the following vision statement. The vision for the West Standdale district is one of a mixed-use, transit-oriented western gateway to the city of Walker. West Standdale will be a walkable environment, integrating a variety of housing types with the preservation of existing wetlands, the inclusion of open space that function as natural bioswales. West Standdale will also contain 30 to 50,000 square foot of commercial space adjacent to Ferndale Station. That's the rapid stop located at the corner of Ferndale and Lake Michigan. There's also in bold at the bottom here, the following policy statement. West Standdale site should be developed in accordance with the vision and design features described in this section. It should not be developed as a conventional multifamily housing complex with commercial outlots along Lake Michigan Drive. In addition to this, what you see here, the vision statement and this policy statement, there is this design concept, which is based on transit-oriented development located in Lake Forest, Illinois. And earlier in my report, I provided an image of what that development looks like today. There is a central square along the main street. I'm just going to jump up there for you. So this is an image of what that development looks like today. You can see a central square, commercial, and then it gets back into smaller commercial and residential behind. That's what this was based on, this concept. The planning commissioners are encouraged to consider this entire West Standdale redevelopment plan and which components are guiding policy items and which are more aspirational kind of visionary statements, things that we would love to see but might not be necessarily required for a development to move forward. And I believe that's all of the kind of the highlights I wanted to provide at this time. I'm happy to answer any questions or go back over any of that. I know there was a lot of information there. I usually try not to talk quite this long for the board.
Any questions for Paula at this point? One thing in the pattern book, especially along that east line, it shows for those lots common to Meyer and Blaine's there's driveways shown.
Yes, you can see them clearly on the site plan as well. They're proposed to be service drives. They're, the main access for clients, staff, et cetera, I believe is to be off of the extension of LaSalle.
Okay. And the uses that are described for the CPUD zoning, so that kind of sums it up right there in that graphic. So if those are shown on there and it's forwarded on with a recommendation, if there's one or two uses in there that one would have concern with, that would be expressed as we would make the recommendation on the CPUD, correct?
Yes, that list was originally a little bit longer, and staff had some concerns about some of the proposed optional, you know, like additional uses that are C4 uses to be added in. A
Yep.
few of those have been removed. What you see is the remaining list. And if there are proposed uses, especially those additional C4 uses that the commissioner has concerns about fitting in with the village atmosphere, fitting in with this, the redevelopment of this area, aligning with the components of the master plan, now is the appropriate time to discuss those and whether or not they should be allowed or should potentially be struck from the approval. Because if the PASP is approved, that will carry forward to an FASP, a future project that would come back and be allowed as part of the development.
Gotcha, okay, all right. Any other comments or questions before we go to city engineer? Okay, Scott?
So in our report, we really avoided all of the discussion about zoning and the pattern book, but I don't want you to think that we didn't participate in those reviews, and we certainly provided a lot of collaboration, and I think many cases helped, you know, make those documents, or make that all work together a little bit better. But for our report's purposes, we are just looking at the PASP. So this is really your last chance to look at the roadway and utility network, because if this was to get moved forward, the developer would then submit final construction drawings to us that we'd review at staff level to help get the public infrastructure in place to allow then for all the FASPs from the individual lots. So I just want to remind you that it is a big deal to look at this, make sure you're happy with it. We have covered it over and over and over at many meetings, and probably more than you would imagine at staff level with friends at MDOT, with the different design team members, and just among staff. Basically what you're seeing here with the big change for the site from the last few iterations is that LaSalle is now proposed as kind of the backbone for this development. The reason that has been done is to kind of clean up the primary access for the site. So if you remember before, primary access was over at Ferndale. The developer couldn't confirm that the access that was there was public. There was some debate back and forth. Ultimately, the city's attorneys couldn't sign off on that. In the end, that's probably a very good thing, because they've worked themselves into a better design with an independent drive, with a new public road system that'll have a traffic signal at Lake Michigan Drive, and so some of those side connections there over to the Goodwill driveway and then over to Ferndale, they can now be private. So we don't have to worry about the publicness of those. We can still make sure that they look public, that they operate in an efficient way, but they will be taken care of privately and by the association that takes care of this commercial planned unit development. So that's a good thing. MDOT has also tentatively granted the approval for that new signal. Things change and get modified all the time with that. If this was to delay for a long time, we'd probably still have to keep revisiting traffic volumes and things, but I think at this point, they seem like they're pretty satisfied with that. There was also a new traffic impact study provided. That's basically the traffic report that comes with these developments. Those reports are hundreds of pages long. It's difficult to summarize those, but I think what we did was try to put a couple of tables in here that you could look at and digest at your leisure. So essentially they did charts just like this for the major driveways around the development. So that's M45 and M11, M45 and the Goodwill driveway, M45 in LaSalle, which is the new drive, M45 in Ferndale, and then around the corner at M11 and the new Standale crossings that goes between Meyer and Blaines. So the tables that we put in the report are the two most relevant ones, I think, for the development and for the PASP, and that is M45 and M11, because that is the busiest one. That's the one that has the most restrictions, the most congestion. And then also the new one, which is M45 in LaSalle. So as you look at those, there's different columns. I'm sure you worked at trying to understand that a little bit to this point, but as a summary, there's an existing column that kind of tells you how things are today. There is a future or a background column that basically looks at what would happen over time with natural growth in the area without the development. And that is to kind of show that, you know, things will get a little bit worse even without the development. Then they add in the development itself, which is called the build out with no mitigation. And then the final column is the build out with some mitigation. So you might say, what is mitigation? What does that even mean? In this case, the mitigation is a little hocus pocus with the traffic signals in the area. So they would go in after the development's in place, after they've taken updated traffic counts, they being in this case probably MDOT, and they would consider making some changes to steal some green time from some legs to add it to others to help make things work a little bit better. So I think in the report, the assumption's always made that the mitigation will take place. In reality, MDOT doesn't like to make those changes because it's a big deal to steal green time from some of these movements when there's this much congestion. So they will monitor that later if this moves forward and make those decisions at that time. A couple other comments to get through. The roadway in this development is proposed to be 33 feet wide with 3 lanes of bituminous, that's the asphalt, and a 66-foot right-of-way. Most new developments with a 3-lane road, we end up with 36 feet of pavement and an 86-foot right-of-way, so quite a bit bigger. But this was kind of a compromise that was worked out with the management team and the developer, and we've agreed that we could probably work with that, both engineering and DPW. You know, we'd certainly like to have it bigger and better, but in this case, they want to use that as a little bit of traffic calming. And certainly there's some curves in this road that are going to require low traffic calming. If we make this road to industrial standards, we don't want, you know, high speeds going across these driveways, and this, what we want to make is a little neighborhood area. So I think that's something for the Planning Commission to consider, but at this point, we're okay with the 33 foot as long as it's 3 feet of paved area, doesn't include the curb and gutter. We want to make sure that there's 3 realistic lanes there for all the different turning movements in the site. The new signal at LaSalle would be a mast arm signal that's consistent with our city standards. So you'd get the illuminated signs, you get something similar to what we have at Lake Michigan and Kinney. That's a relatively new signal. So it would help with the aesthetics in the area as well and give this a little bit more of an identity. The applicants also propose to use 6 feet concrete sidewalks within their development, which is consistent with Lake Michigan Drive and the DDA theme, and the sidewalk design for that, and you may see some pictures of this later when the FASPs come in. It isn't just square blocks, it's a 3x3 pattern with a special tooling, and it just looks a little bit fancier and really gives it an identity. So we think that's a nice thing. And then Paul also mentioned that they've taken copies of the street lights that are going to be, the pedestrian lighting that's going to be going in Standale, incorporated that in as well. We still have to work out the details of how that would go in on the public road. It may be that the DDA gets involved and that becomes part of the DDA assessment, or it may be that there's some arrangement worked out where they put those in as part of their construction for the road. We don't have those details yet, but I think we can work that out at staff level. The mobility connections page shows some different pedestrian crossings that are mid-block. The ones that are on the private road, we can kind of give them a little bit more authority on. The ones that are on the public road, we want to be a little bit more careful about, and really think through those. So we would ask that you consider delegating that to us at staff level to work through that as we look at the actual construction drawings. And then the last thing to bring up is, it's kind of sad that we have to bring this up, but we've had quite a few developments in the last couple years that they've put the development in, and then they started selling lots within the development without putting in the private utilities, which is electric, gas, phone, cable. I never would have thought this would have happened in the past. But I think it's time to put this into the reports now when we do a PUD like this, to make sure that somebody doesn't come in and buy one of these and then find out later they don't have electricity. It's a pretty fundamental need.
Yeah.
So, that's it for us.
Any comments or questions for Scott? I guess wanted to applaud Scott in the engineering office, working with MDOT, working with the developers on the access into the property to realign the public road connection into Lake Michigan Drive. I think that's a definite plus from the prior project. So just offer that as a comment.
Good teamwork.
At this point, be an opportunity for the applicant to come forward and, you know, the stick, name,
I
address.
feel like I've been here before. Todd
presentation.
Grassman, Jag Development. So I don't want to spend a ton of time going over a whole bunch of stuff and a whole bunch of detail that you guys have already had and that we've talked about. So I'll probably just summarize some of the changes and some of the items that we've worked on. You know, I think Scott mentioned, and you heard that we spent a lot of time since our last meeting going through the traffic study. You know, you hear people complain about traffic and they complain about not in my backyard. There's not a lot of people that we are in their backyards, because you got Meyer, you got the funeral, or the grave, the cemetery, and then the piece to the south. And then traffic, which, you know, coincidentally was our last item that we sort of hit last time. And you know, the two conditions that we had after our last meeting were, you know what, you really got to figure out that public roads Ferndale thing, and you really need to figure out the left turn sequencing out onto Lake Michigan Drive from Ferndale. And working with MDOT all summer, and Scott and the staff, we were able to address that. You know, we spent the first meeting we had, we sort of looked at, and that was sort of pre-pattern book. We talked a little bit about how does this all tie together. How does commercial tie together? How do we make it a village? How do we stop it from being individual outlots that we're just sticking up against Lake Michigan Drive? How does it tie into the residential piece that we hope at a future date will be in there? So that's where the pattern book came out of. That's a little bit different than we did when we were across the street over at Westtown. You know, you didn't have the similarity between what's the facade's going to look like. Are we having consistent signage? Are we having the tie-in with the sidewalks, with the streetlights, that kind of stuff? You know, I think one change that we made to the plans that Scott, not included in Scott's report, but Scott suggested was the sidewalk, the DDA sidewalk that goes along with Sale on the west side there. Instead of 6 foot, we made it 8 foot. I thought there was just one other way to tie in the walkability, the mobility of the whole site, bringing that all the way down. So the first time we spent a lot of time, and you had a lot of questions about how do we stop this from being just a whole bunch of individual sites. So we said, you know, let's put this pattern book together, and we try to do that. And I think that's a pretty good product, and it gives you an idea of what everybody up front will be bound by. They have similar to homeowners association. There'll be an owners association that handles all the parking and all the asphalt and that kind of thing. Now, I think one thing that's going to be that we can talk about now, or we can talk about at a later point, whether it's FASP or not. You know, we've talked about, do you want them set up against the road? Do you want them back a little bit? Do you want cross access, which we've included on all those sites? Do you want it in the front? Do you want it in the back? We've got both layouts, really. You know, if you want to push it up a little bit closer, well, it could do that. You could make that look, or do you want it to where it's currently lined with the buildings to the east of us from the commercial side? You know, we're flexible to that standpoint, but what we want to emphasize is we've got that cross access all the way across. And it's a condition of the sale, and it's a condition of the approval here. So last time, I think we spent most of our time honestly talking about what does it look like, how does it meet the master plan. I think we've had a lot of discussion on that. I think most of you felt that at the time in the stroll Paul said, yeah, I think, you know, we got to that point. That's why we ended up with, we got to fix Ferndale, and we got to fix that left turn stacking. I think we ended up with a really good solution there, getting MDOT to approve LaSalle as a spine, as a backbone to that public road, which, you know, really sort of became the focus of the last meeting. Is we really need that spine, and I don't think we we hadn't noticed or understood that it was that big of a criteria. That was real evident after the last meeting, so we went back and tackled that. We've got MDOT to approve it. We've got them to work through, and we worked with staff pretty much all summer, going through all the different iterations. What does it look like? How do you tie it in? And how do you keep that community? So that's a lot of what we did. I think it's a good product. I think, the piece to the left, the residential piece, because the moratorium, we're not suggesting that, but I do think that being able to move forward with this allows us to put the whole road in, which is a pretty key piece. We'll put the utilities in with it. I think it's crazy when you don't do that up front. The cost-wise, it's a lot. If you try to shove cost to users later, it doesn't end up well. Lot 10 has to run electric for all the previous lots because they didn't get sold yet. That doesn't make any sense. We don't want to do that. So it wouldn't be a problem. But we've tied it into the public road system. We've tried where we can to tie it in with that community feeling with the DDA standards and all that. We're limited physical-wise with what we can do on the site with the topography. We spent probably half one meeting talking about that. Talking about how does this compare to the place down in Illinois. I think you're still looking a little bit at apples and oranges. That community, you got 650 high net worth people coming off of a train station right there, walking across a not as busy road. That's a tough comparison. I think their average income is $173,000 within a mile of that place. Our average income within a mile is $88,000. We got a bus line. I think we tie in well to it. I think all that cross access, I think all the mobility, we paid a lot of attention to that, spent a lot of time with staff doing that. So I hope this meets what you're looking for, but I'll answer any questions you got.
Commissioners, questions, comments? Just to get it started, cross-section of the public street, is that gonna have curb and gutter on the edge?
It would still look it would look a lot like the normal, like a North Ridge. It would just be a little bit narrower. And if you think about it in terms of, industrial roads, for example, it's probably livable here because we're not gonna have that kind of a truck traffic. The commercial stuff here is gonna be more traditional commercial, and we don't expect to see a lot of tractor trailer activity.
Yeah, but in terms of curb and gutter on the
Right.
edge,
Absolutely.
how about the private street portion of this? Will that be rolled asphalt or will that be concrete?
Steve? Private roads, rolled asphalt, concrete, they're rolled asphalt, right?
The edges of it,
Yeah,
I believe we have curb and gutter on all of it.
Yeah, I think the way they've shown it so far is identical to a public street.
Yeah, it's all.
okay,
There you go. I'm glad I had him here.
yeah.
But Scott could answer that for me. Thanks, Scott.
I have comments.
I got one, just
Yep,
one other
go
point I
ahead.
can make. If you take a look at that, when it comes to some of the truck traffic, if you go down that access road that we share with Meyer behind, we're gonna have where that breaks, sort of breaks off of Ferndale there. From that point south is gonna have signs that say private road, and that's basically gonna be the back side is what we consider more of the loading and unloading areas there. Just to stop all that traffic from going through. So I think the main drag will be going into Ferndale, coming over towards, either going to Meyer or going over towards our LaSalle entrance. But then that would be the back, and that, the road, the businesses would front LaSalle.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, you're fine. So for me, I really struggle with where we're at here, and I know that I understand where Paul, I'm glad you kind of went through the rationale in terms of your views on how we align with the master plan here, because when I first saw the project come through, I really struggled with it, because when I look at our neighborhood corridor plan, right, when we worked through that process of designing that district and the community character that we intended for it, our goals were to have a mixed-use style development that came together in creating a sense of place. We didn't want to see outlots, things like that, right? That's the way we wrote it, and I think that, again, and this is like getting ahead of it, but that's part of why we have to have another discussion on the master plan, right? Because I don't think that we put sufficient guidance in for staff and for developers to give a clear image of what we're trying to achieve there, right? I think that's become very clear to me because this corridor specifically is an area where we really wanted to see intentional, very deliberate and integrated mixed uses. And I think the simple fact that you're here today with a strictly commercial development flies directly in the face of what our overall overarching goal was to complete on this lot, right? This project was really, the site as a whole in the big picture of what we want to achieve as a city was really thought through to be this big, comprehensive, integrated development. We really wanted to lean into what we have in terms of access with the Laker line and that stop. I think this development actually, like looking at, I think I have a number of problems with how we're transitioning, frankly, away from that transit-oriented development, those principles, by moving our primary access road further away from that significant investment we made in the Laker line stop. I look at where your pocket park is, that's on the exact opposite end of that frontage, further away from where my intention would be to have pedestrians come into the site. My thought is, you know, on the west end, who's your user of that small park space, right? Maybe the people that use that furthest west lot, but who's gonna walk from lots, any of the other lots to that space to really use it, right? How is that integrated into the overall design for all of the users? If I'm a user, let's talk about the residential space that we hope to see in the future behind this lot. Who's gonna walk to that far northwest corner of this space, right? If I'm a resident, I'm going back and forth to that Laker line stop potentially. This is not designed for that to be well integrated, I don't think. Further, I guess going back to the misunderstanding of the master plan that I feel we've kind of got here, the neighborhood corridor, community character zone, I don't think was intended to be a strictly commercial zone, right? We're talking about it like it's supposed to be a commercial use area and that commercial use aligns. I think commercial use can be done in the space, but I don't think it's intentional to be like this strictly commercial area. And I think seeing it as a strictly commercial area with these buildings in the center of a big parking lot on an individual lot repeated across all of the site, I think that's where we run into the problem and the feeling of an outlot style design, right? That's how it feels to me. I can't see myself going here without taking a car, right? That's just the way if I'm walking through here, I have to walk through the parking lot and through a sea of pavement from building to building between two separate parking lots. I really struggle with the way that the uses are integrated. Again, our future land use plan calls it out as mixed use. And frankly, we suggest a mixed use zoning district as we look onto the individual site in the master plan. Gosh, I made a lot of notes. I really think that while I understand how we got to moving the traffic light to LaSalle, I think it is a move away from the focus that we wanted to make and being intentional about really leaning into the asset that we have in the Laker line and the value of those locations and the purpose for which we put them there, right? I think that we get a ton of people going through that stop to the Meyer, walking, using their feet at human scale, right? As we kind of intended for this larger area, and I think that what we've got to the west here doesn't complement that really at all to me. As far as uses on the site, I look at the note here, note 1, and I look at those 4 uses that we do call out as usable, and I don't feel ultra comfortable with any of them because, again, they are the types of uses that are not placemaking, right? And that is more my individual preference. I don't think that necessarily is something that is a an inherent flaw in the plan, right? I can just not feel comfortable and it can still be okay on that piece of it. But I just, for me, this is a long way from where I think we want to be if we're being intentional about how we're developing and how we're using this site in the larger scale of the future of the city. And I think that this is an important site to the future of the city. So I guess those are my comments, and I'm open to any feedback on it.
For the benefit of the rest of the commissioners, you mentioned the neighborhood corridor area. I apologize, I skipped over this when I was summarizing my report, but each of the community character designations has a few pages in the master plan which talk about the intent of that designation and what uses are appropriate there, and I carried that over here. The appropriate land uses in the neighborhood corridor areas include, quote, low-density businesses such as personal services, small offices, and convenience stores. Residential uses including multifamily and missing middle-style housing units are also appropriate, unquote. And so, according to that section of the master plan, it allows for mixed use, but is focused on commercial, in my reading of it. So I just wanted to put that out there. You mentioned it, and I wanted to make sure everyone knew what you were talking about.
Yeah, and I think that we just kind of perceive that content differently, right? I view it as like we're trying to integrate these uses in this space versus, but yeah, again, that's where we run into the problem that we've got with the master plan at large, and why we are being intentional about how we're talking about the residential zoning in the city at this time.
Tyler raised a good point. This is set up as a public hearing, so at this point, we'll entertain a motion to.
Make a motion to open the public hearing.
Support. Motion by Tyler, supported by Joe, to open the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Anyone here that wants to offer comment on this, if you could please approach the podium, give us your name and address, and share with us your thoughts.
You're limited to 3 minutes, so I'm kind of keeping time.
I can keep that. Paul Jackson, 3100 Springbrook Drive. I would agree with Mr. Gilbert's observations with respect to the mixed use. I think that particular site, and given the surrounding area and everything, I think tends to be very supportive of residential in combination with commercial and something along those lines. And again, I would agree with Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Lochitz. We have the property with 4568, 4575, goes from Ferndale to Macomb on Livingston Drive. So I guess my question is, what's happening to that intersection? We have the north side of Ferndale. Is that going to be widened because it's pretty narrow there now? If there's going to be a lot more traffic, right now it backs up to our entrance into our parking lot. So I guess is that going to get widened and lose some of our parking lot? We got the Laker line stop right in front of our building. So right now we got all kinds of Meyer shopping carts. I come in Monday morning and I got one on our front door blocking our entrance, and so we've had issues there. We have a private for our access between the two parking lots behind our building is being used as a public road at this point. People come through there to get to the light at Ferndale, so almost hit a few cars a few times, cars flying through there. So I just want to see what's going to be done with those type of issues that we have. So I like the idea of the light at LaSalle because that's going to take out some of the traffic issues there at Ferndale, but I understand your issues there, so thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to come forward and offer their comment?
Will we have time for comments on other topics when this is done?
Well, the topics we're looking at is the rezoning and the development plan. Do you have comments outside of that?
Yes. A number of us are.
If you could come forward, please. Thank you.
Bill Allen, 345 Dakota Drive, Northwest, Grand Rapids, Michigan, or Walker. A number of us are here from the Springbrook Green Ridge neighborhood, concerned about the trenching and sewer line that's being laid in with the new pump station, and just wondering how that affects our neighborhood and the proposed development that's going in. And we're hoping to be able to ask some questions and see if anything is, what is going on there with that.
So you're talking about the area around Green Ridge Center?
Yes.
Okay. Green Ridge Center, the time for that would have been right at the beginning of the meeting. Because that was for the general comment outside of the projects that are for public hearing this evening. Don't want to put you off.
Terry, I can stick around after and answer their questions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the Vista 45 project? Okay, seeing none.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion by Tyler,
Support.
supported by Dan to close the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. All right.
I have some comments.
Okay.
The question is the master plan, and it's been that way since this came in. And Paula read the excerpts from page 67 and 68, and it directly talks about, yeah, there might be some current commercial up by Lake Michigan Drive, but it doesn't talk at all about down here at all. The map is a little bit different than what the statement says. I'm in total agreement with Steve, where what you got right now for commercial almost mirrors what is along Lake Michigan Drive and Wilson in Westtown. You got 4 lots up on Lake Michigan Drive. You only have 5 lots over there. You got 6 lots here down along the east side. It's just a mirror. It's just a flip mirror of that. I don't think that is what we were looking at all. I can't vote for this, the rezoning or the PSP. It's just not what we had talked about. I think what the planning city commission did was the moratorium was say, we really have to look at this. When we went through the master plan, we went through everything. So some of the details got lost in the volume of what we had to do. So I think this really needs to be looked at. The city commission is doing it. They've instigated that. So I just don't think we can move forward on this. So that's my opinion.
Joe, do you have any comments at this juncture?
Well, I'm not overwhelmed with this. I thought Scott thought the street going through was a pretty good idea and well done. I thought that was good. What he brought up about there with the entranceway, thought that was okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Joe. Pat?
I'm mixed on this a little bit because they kind of did what we told them to do at the last meeting from the standpoint of who wants to have living space pointing at the back of Meyer. So this actually did kind of what we said, put some businesses up against the back of Meyer and then put the housing on the other side of that, or the future. I know Steve's point of we got this Laker line up at the top there. I mean, are we talking putting another parking lot there like we did, next to Shots? I mean, is that what we want to do? Put a parking lot so people can ride their bikes or whatever up there? I don't know. I'm not real sold on the whole, this is where I want to live, next to a cemetery, next to Meyer on a busy street. So I'm in between the whole, make this a great community to live in and shop at and everything else, when I don't see this as the best spot, but that's just my own opinion.
This is my first time seeing this. You guys everyone here has been through this for months. So I've just done a lot of listening tonight. That's pretty much what I've tried to do here. And as much as I know about our master plan, we've talked about residential, we need mixed use. You know, this goes in line with all the things we've kind of been discussing here. And I know the master plan needs work in the future here. You know, kind of like Joe, I'm not overwhelmed with it. I understand why it's here. But as is, it's not something I really am very, I could say I'm passionate about by any stretch. Thank you.
My perspective on it, I appreciate what Steve said as far as that focus of where the Laker line is, the stops that have been established along Lake Michigan Drive, and by moving the street to the west, it kind of takes that away from it. And perhaps that would suggest that some of those common areas that mentioned for the gateway or the park would maybe a little bit more to the east than they are right now. I think that the integrity of that as a focal point for the transit entering into this property, I think is good. In fact, I'm wondering as this would develop and the interconnections it would create with the existing circulation within the Meyer area, Meyer and the other outlots there, that may pull it a little bit to the west as well, because those will interconnect with that. So you brought up a good point, and I'm not sure if I've got a good answer to it, but it's a recognition that I think that's a valid consideration here. But I think we've they've improved the project by at least the public street layout that they've laid out right here. The commercial stretch of it, I think the pattern book that they put together and the thought and detail that they provided is very good. It's just that using that commercial village, and it's described as a commercial village right on the M45 as well as along that east lot line. I'm seeing that more as a transition area than a commercial village in that respect. Sure, Tyler.
I agree with Terry. The plan itself is good. I mean, the streets and everything. The problem is the intention of where we wanted to go with this. I can't criticize the streets or the lining. I think they did a fabulous job on that. You know, if it was in a bubble, I would say, hey, that looks great, and do it. It's the intent of where the city wants to go. The city commission is getting hammered by the citizens about our development and what they accuse us of haphazard development. And I think taking a step back here, as the city commission is important, and that's my hang up. It's not the structure, it's not the intent, it's where we wanted to go with this. So I just wanted to clarify that.
My sense on this is that I think the moratorium is focused upon the housing portion of it, but as Steve pointed out, there are some provisions of our master plan that didn't come through as clear as perhaps some thought they should be, and I think that's in this case the commercial portion of this. There may be some benefit of perhaps tabling action on this to allow for that conversation to take place, not only for housing, but for this particular location, how that commercial is integrated into the development plan. Might be a consideration as we look at deciding what to do this evening, because we've got an option to approve with conditions, deny, or table. And if we do table, it's imperative upon us, for the benefit of the community as well as the applicant, that we're specific as far as what those concerns are, so that as we go forward, those can be addressed.
Yeah, and just in response to that, I would say, I can get on board with tabling pending the completion of the review of the master plan. Short of that, I'm at a point where I would be voting to, or I would be making a motion to deny the project. So my thought is a tabling to the end of the master plan process review makes sense to me. But I certainly am just not there for being in favor of it tonight.
Point out there's two motions. One is the rezoning, which is an up or down, not tabling. That's the first motion.
It's a recommendation, so up or down, recommendation to the city commission who makes the final decision.
So if that fails, if that doesn't go through, this plan can't go through. It's not tabling the plan, it's denying or accepting the rezoning.
But in terms of communication between the city commission and the planning commission over the last year, I think the city commission's made it clear if you're gonna recommend approval on a rezoning,
You have to send
send the PASP with it. And that's,
So if we do vote to rezone and then we vote to table it, the rezoning doesn't go forward.
well, yeah, and so I think that it's a case here that if we're considering a tabling on the action on the PASB, I think it's an option available to us to table action on the rezoning at the same time.
I think we're there then.
Mr. Grassman?
So it's been 2 years. And I'd like a little up or down. It's been 2 years.
I make a motion to deny the rezoning based on that it does not follow the master plan as written, and that the master plan is under review. And I would leave that to the city commission.
Support.
Okay, motion by Tyler, supported by Stephen to deny the rezoning request at hand. Discussion.
He wanted an answer.
Yeah, but I think that, I think there's a lot of good that's associated with this project, and to, at this juncture, to just deny it.
I'm not denying the preliminary site plan.
You're
I'm denying the motion to rezone because we can't deliver what we want.
Gotcha. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, let's think this over. A lot of effort's been gone into this, and, yeah, let's not, jump to conclusions here and make something we don't want to live with. I mean, they've got some good, I thought this commercial part was okay. Myself, and the road coming in there was okay. I think it's the housing we're concerned about, isn't it?
Well, I think housing is a concern on the overall, but in terms of this particular request, they are not asking for the housing at this point. They're asking for the commercial portion of it. And we've got some difference of opinion, I think, amongst the commission right here.
Sure we do.
As far as to recommend approval of it as submitted for the preliminary area site plan. And so I think that's the reason why the motion to deny is because as the city commission has requested, if you're going to make a recommendation to approve on a rezoning, have a preliminary area site plan with it for them to consider as a whole and not on a piecemeal basis. So within those parameters, that's why Tyler is offering this, if I'm
You
not
said
mistaken.
it better than me. Thank you.
So that's what we're deliberating here. I know that it's frustrating for you, obviously, in terms of a point of saying, well, just make a decision on the rezoning. But it would be at a loss of all the work that was put into it to this point to have that as the action taken this evening.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Masvero, Executive Vice President at Charette Group, partnering with JAG on this project. Thanks for the opportunity to present this project to you again. As Todd pointed out, we have been working on this for more than 18 months. Numerous meetings with the city staff, who have been wonderful to work with MDOT, which we've talked about, obviously with the Planning Commission, joint work sessions with the City Commission, a number of steps along the way to make sure that we could try to comply to the extent that we could. We've talked, as Todd mentioned, at length about the, I don't think when that master plan drawing was put into place that it was engineered, right? We all know that there are some limitations that we found along the way in trying, if we wanted to bring that plan forward to you tonight, you wouldn't be able to approve it. Those streets don't work, there's not stormwater, there's all these other challenges with the master plan. But what I can tell you is that everything you've asked us to do, that we can physically and economically do, we've complied with. We have put in turn lanes, we have put in this major spine road that connects all the way through from Lake Michigan Drive over to eventually in the future O'Brien, which is a major component of the city's mobility plan. There are a few very key goals in there, and that's one of them. Relief to that intersection, that traffic is critical. So we have provided that, and not only have we offered to build it, we've offered to build it to public specs, to bear all the costs, and then to give it to the city. We are trying to help you meet your plan objectives. We are doing everything within our power to do that. Let me walk through just a couple of things if I can. If this were to be developed as individual lots, we would not get the cross access. We would not get the architectural consistency that we proposed. We would not get the shared parking that we've proposed. We would not have common areas like that Gateway Park. The reason we put it at that west side is because the master plan, which we have studied for years, says we want this to be an entrance to Standale. You know where the entrance to Standale? That's the closest we can put it, is at that west side where people are coming in. It also abuts a beautiful wetland area. So you've got a relatively small park area, but it's this beautiful natural area behind. It makes sense, and it complies with the master plan. All right, so you want quality development. We've heard that about your zoning rewrite. We're paying attention to that too. We have provided so many of the things that the zoning rewrite asks for. We've already volunteered them. This project represents all of that. It demonstrates it. We've given you photos. We've committed to it. We will, this all, when we look at our development role, we have to work with all of these commercial users. They all have branding. They all have their own site design. They have their own building designs and signage and branding. These are hurdles we're gonna have to work through with them, but we are willing to do it because we want to be good citizens in the city of Walker. We want to bring forward a really quality project. We want a viable development that is a proper and high quality gateway to Standale and represents the city well. We're committed to doing that. We would not have that if these were individual lots. Signage, seating, hardscaping, landscaping, ongoing maintenance, those are all parts of this commercial village. Those are integrated, it's a whole. It will have long-lasting, deeded legal control over this commercial village so that it hangs together and lasts for the long term. The public streets meet the city's goal for complete streets, meets the mobility plan. As Todd mentioned, the public streets are going to utilize the Standale DDA standards, so we create the sense of place that is consistent with the surrounding areas. The master plan emphasizes that pedestrian connectivity. We have delivered that everywhere we possibly could, but we have to acknowledge that the site is on M45. It's a state trunk line. It is vehicular by nature and by design. We will work with that as much as we possibly can, but we can't overcome the fact that we have a high traffic area that we are working with, and it's going to be vehicle oriented to an extent. But where we can protect, where we can move internally, where we can add internal roads, internal signage, pedestrian connectivity, bike connectivity, we have done that at every opportunity, and we'll make sure that it's developed. We've talked about the MDOT commitments. We're expanding the turn lane into LaSalle so that that is safe and effective. We have tucked bike, you asked about bike connectivity. We've tucked that in at the backside of the commercial lots. Up here on the drawing, it's between, at the backside of lots 3 and 4. The intent of that is to keep it nearer the private roads, not on LaSalle, so that it's safer. Some covered bike parking there would be terrific, and it's an easy private road access over to the Laker line. We have considered these things, we have thought about them, and we promise to deliver them. We've also agreed to expand Ferndale on the south side. We've agreed to add additional turn lanes, take that out of our land in that commercial space. So we're, again, creating those opportunities and supporting the city's desire for infrastructure. We've committed to not only provide a brand new mass arm traffic signal at LaSalle, but we've committed to provide an upgraded new mass arm signal at Ferndale. The master plan calls for preserving wetlands by easement. We have committed to do that. Significant portions, that entire side of the site, will be protected and preserved just as the master plan calls for. We want the site to be as walkable as it can be. Right now, the nearest neighbors to the east are at Westtown. You'd have to walk past Meyer to be able to walk to us. We welcome that. We want to encourage that, but we also need to look realistically at it. If you want to come to us from the west, the nearest neighborhoods, there are a couple houses along M45, but the nearest neighborhood is, I believe it's Thomas Street. There are 2 cul-de-sac neighborhoods down there with a handful of houses. And then we have to come across M45 to get pedestrian traffic across. We hope LaSalle encourages that, but we also have to be realistic. This is a vehicle-driven site on a major state trunk line. We'll add pedestrian connectivity wherever we can, but the primary pedestrians in that site are going to be from the future residential that comes in to that land, because it's buffered by a big box store, by 2 big box stores, by a cemetery, by a state trunk line, and by power lines. So this is not a controversial development. We have been in public hearings now several times. Not a single neighbor has objected. I don't know if the city has received any feedback from neighbors, but we certainly haven't heard about it. I think it's a welcome addition, and I would encourage you to look at all the ways we do comply with the master plan. Wherever it's been feasible, we have done that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Chris Meyer. I'm counsel for JAG, which is the developer on this project. As you know, we were here in December. Mr. Harland wasn't here in December, but the rest of you were. Mr. Gilbert was absent at that meeting. There were 7 commissioners here at that time. Mr. Wash asked the commissioners to asked Mr. Schweitzer to poll the commissioners as to whether they thought this complied with the master plan. 6 out of the 7 commissioners said that it did. The point of polling them was because we knew we needed all this work on the traffic. And that was the last issue. It took a long time. It's working with MDOT, right? I mean, MDOT's very careful with its traffic system and takes a good amount of time to work with them. So the planning commissioners told us 6 out of 7 in December, go forth, fix the traffic problem, you meet the master plan. The only person to say no on that was Mr. Corvish. And I understand he remains in opposition. But the Planning Commission itself speaks with one voice. It speaks with its majority. And it spoke last time, 6 out of 7, said this meets with the master plan. And we put in, since December, we're now in late October, we put in 11 months of work on this, right? And so we asked for a vote tonight, an approval, a recommendation of an approval of the PSAP, because we have met the traffic. We heard the good words from Mr. Connor. We've met with MDOT. We've satisfied the traffic issues. I think everybody thinks that having that spine down LaSalle is a better solution. The 11 months were worth it. We've got a better traffic circulation. So we asked for a recommendation for the approval, that the Planning Commission stand by its what it told us in December, that it meets, that we meet the master plan for all the reasons that Andrea put forward. And we've met the traffic problems or issues that the December Planning Commission wanted us to address. Those have been resolved. Andrea explained why the park is on the west side of the, it's a minor issue, but why it's on the west side. But what I love about that is how deep the thinking has gone over the last almost 2 years on this project as to where to put the pocket park, because there's going to be wetlands right behind it that are going to be preserved in perpetuity. So, you know, we've done everything the Planning Commission has asked us to do. And we asked for a approval tonight where the PSAP is approved and the rezoning is recommended to the City Commission. If you have any questions, and I don't think there are any questions, we're happy to ask them.
I'd ask a question. I don't know your name, sir. Yeah, last time, or 2 times ago he was here, I said directly to him, this does not conform to the master plan. And he says, no, it does not. So is he going back on that? Are you holding us to our word? Are you holding him into his word? Which word is it here?
So
No, I just want, is he still in that position?
Yeah, we
Tyler, at that time, the plan was completely different.
No, it was not. It had the same up and down and it had the residential behind it. It's the same.
That could be.
It just took out the residential. Now, you said it did not conform. Now, does it or not?
You want to put up the aspirational plan there, Ms. Preby? It's not, this is, we conform to the master plan. The only thing here is this from Lake Forest, Illinois, which is a high-income suburb of Chicago where the average household income approaches $200,000 a year, and hundreds of high-income commuters get off of the.
I understand all that. Does it conform to the master
Yes.
plan?
Yes, because this is aspirational.
That is in the master plan on page 68.
No, but that's not.
Is it in the master plan or not?
I will read you what.
Is it in the master plan or not?
As an aspirational document.
The whole master plan is an aspirational document.
That's a
correct?
good point.
So, it doesn't conform to the master plan. If the rest of the planning commission wants to vote me down, I'm fine with that, and we will speak with one voice. We always do. I'll walk out that door. I hold no ill will to anybody. This is just business. But we are told that we have to follow rules, just like everybody. And I'm insisting on following the rules. That's all I'm doing.
So let me read what's from the minutes when you put that in your master plan. Frank Wash said, this stylistic concept plan could be kept in the master plan, but if a developer wanted to do something different, the city could be open to that.
Yep.
Okay? It's an aspirational, and it's not realistic.
That's what we're doing, is dealing with it.
And that's what our point is, that we meet every aspect of your master plan.
No, you
other
don't.
than that.
You don't meet this.
Secondly of all, the master plan is merely a guide. All right?
Right.
And so we.
But you keep insisting.
Let's go back. Let's go back and talk about that. Let's go back to where we had this conversation throughout of 2020.
Yes or no?
It does. And to the extent that we had this conversation back in 2022, it came to a point in December where Mr. Wash wisely said, let's have a poll of the planning commissioners. And we did, and 6 out of 7 said it met the master plan. So we have the planning commission on record in the minutes saying it meets the master plan.
Am I voting any different?
You are not voting any different.
Okay.
I understand Mr. Gilbert is not going to vote any different, but we have 6 out of 7 of the planning commissioners in December saying it met the master plan.
And we have him on record saying it doesn't conform to the master plan. So which do you want to go with?
I will go with what the planning commission said back in December.
I will go with what your representatives.
And what I think the conversation you're referring to, Mr. Korfagi, is back in summer of 2022, when the plan was very different. So we're happy to answer any questions, but we ask for a vote tonight to approve the PSAP and to approve the rezoning.
Yeah, I'll just provide some additional color. I don't think this needs to be necessarily responded to, but I think that, to me, it's you, and I should have parsed my comments with this. A lot of work has gone into the proposal. A lot of work has gone into the proposal. It's been very intentional, and I think that everything that can be done within the confines of the initial proposal, all the formations that could be done to maintain the core of what was initially proposed and make adjustments toward what we say in the master plan have been made, right? The adjustments that can be made towards the master plan within the existing structure of what was initially proposed have gone on. And I appreciate that work, but to me, I think that we started off of a base that does not meet the intent, and removing this drawing, this design concept from it, I think still we are separated from the intention that the master plan was written with. And that's what's really difficult about the process as a whole, is that I don't think that we're working off guidance that provides sufficient clarity to everyone involved, and I think that we continue to spin our wheels here for that reason. So that's where I continue to see people confused, and we continue to have to go back and forth about it, because I don't think the master plan is where it needs to be. And I think that we've continued to find that out as we've gone through all of these major developments, and it's been a continuing struggle since adoption of the document.
I think it's getting late, and we're getting a little frayed here. I think this is a big project, and I think we need to think about it a little more, and I'd be in favor of tabling it and think this over a little bit. I think the staff was sort of supportive of it, and I think they've got some good ideas too. So I think just to vote it up or down tonight is, I don't think we should do that.
Well,
well, I feel the frustration, and I know exactly, I mean, 2 years is a long time to sit and wait, and for us to kind of go back and forth. We do have the moratorium on our master plan right now, as far as the housing. But, you know, I agree, you guys did what we kind of asked you to do the streets and everything else. But then I look at West Town, and I look at what you're gonna have to do with this one. It's a mirror image, and we said a long time ago, we don't want another mirror image of West Town, but this is how it's gonna turn out. If you put all the commercial up against Meyer, which we kind of told you to do, and it's gonna turn out just like that. And I think we said we don't want that, because it didn't work. I don't know, I feel your frustration, but that's what we don't want again. And this is what's gonna turn out. It's gonna turn out all, you know, commercial, and then residential in the middle. And so, my comments, sorry.
all right. We do not have a motion on the floor, do we?
We have a motion and support.
To
Deny the rezoning. That doesn't shut the project down.
Well, we've got a request from the developer to take action this evening. If we don't feel that we're ready to, even though they've asked to say up or down, we are not obligated to go up and down with the rezoning this evening.
I agree with that.
That's my thought on it.
I can go, I'm fine with either of the two directions that we've talked about. I just can't be a yes right now. I'm not there.
If we're not ready to take action on both the rezoning and the PASP this evening, based upon the direction that we've gotten from the city commission, I believe that the appropriate thing to do would be to table.
I'll withdraw my motion. And I'll make a motion. Well, are we tabling all of it then? I make a motion to table pending the review of the city commission and further input. I think it's just, there's a lot of, I mean, you guys are frustrated, I understand. But we get one shot at this, simply. So that's my motion, I guess.
Do we have support?
I can support.
Okay, we have a motion and support to table action on the rezoning as well as the PASB.
Second
Okay, I already did.
Okay, we'll call the question. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
We're organized. Good.
Planning commissioners, respectfully, what is the condition of the tabling? When will this come off the table?
Pardon?
How long is the tabling, and what is the condition for taking it off the table? Last time it was tabled so we could meet the traffic issues. We met the traffic issues and brought it back to the commission. What is the condition here that we need to meet?
You brought back a completely different plan. You didn't bring back what you had with the traffic study, so this is a completely new plan. So the condition is, it doesn't fit the master plan, and we need to wait for some input from the city commission. There's a moratorium on it.
But
And we don't feel,
I think the condition that we talked about throughout the meeting was contingent upon the completion of the review of the master plan
Yeah.
that we're undergoing.
so,
Which is the timeline for that? I sat through the zoning ordinance timeline, but what is the timeline for the master plan? And if you've got a new zoning ordinance, why do you need a new master? Well, I won't go to that point. What is the timing for the master plan?
it was set at, that was set, within a month and a half ago by the city commission for a 6-month period for the moratorium on the housing portion. In this case, our conversation here, I think, is focused upon disagreement amongst our commission, planning commission here, on the intent of the commercial portion of the master plan as it relates to this particular project.
So to answer your question about what the timeline looks like, I think our intent was to be substantially complete with that review within the 6-month period that we're undergoing the review process.
And I think that's projected to be completed, Paula,
April 2024.
April 2024.
Thank you.
All right, we're at the end of the agenda. Paula, any updates on what's on tap for the next meeting?
Sure. The first meeting in November has one project on it, 2 projects on it, 1 project. I've been focused on this all day, and my brain is scrambled.
But will we be spending some of that
Waterford
time?
Village is on the agenda. 'Cause I
Thank
got the-
you, Pat.
I got
It
the
is-
postcard.
Yes, we just discussed this. Thank you, I appreciate that. The residential, single-family components of the Waterford Village PUD is coming back. There are 2 parts to that, and one of them is coming back for a FASP and site condo review. And so those will be coming at the November 1st meeting, the November 15th meeting. I know that date rings a bell for lots of people. That is planned to be the joint meeting about the zoning ordinance. So that is the only thing on that agenda.
Okay. Will there be any discussion about the zoning amendments at the meeting on the 1st?
There absolutely can be. Right before the planning commission meeting that day is the final meeting of the zoning ordinance subcommittee. Then they'll meet at 5 o'clock before the planning commission meeting, but I'm happy to bring back anything if anyone has comments or wants to just dig into any of the components that were discussed at the beginning of tonight's meeting. There will be time at that meeting to discuss further. So please reach out to me if you have any questions. I'll make sure to bring back more information to address them.
And it may also be an opportunity as in this, as we go through this process for us to each look at this portion of the master plan as it relates to this project. Got a lot of good reference material in the packet this evening. And so that when it comes to the point where we have to make a decision, we've all given a lot of good thought to how it does or doesn't meet with the master plan and go forward from there. All right.
Awesome.
Any other business?
Might be wise
You
to
got 2 board members here.
avoid discussions afterwards with the applicant,
Yeah,
just to have, make sure this stays clean.
I'm gonna go out the front door with you.
Yeah, avoid any off the books discussions.
Yep.
Public meeting, public discourse.
All right, do we have a motion to
Motion to adjourn, please.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Guys, I'm sorry if I could